Today, I want to provide an update on the actions we're taking to support the safe reopening of America's schools. Parents around the world who have had their children home for the last few months have a greater appreciation for the fact that teachers are essential workers, that they're essential to our children's future. Our goal is to protect our teachers and students from the China virus while ensuring that families with high risk factors can continue to participate from home. Very important. The American Academy of Pediatrics has released guidance recommending that schools reopen. It said, quote, lengthy time away from school and associated interruption of supportive services often results in a social isolation, making it difficult for schools to identify and address important learning deficits, as well as child and adolescent physical and sexual abuse, substance abuse, depression, and suicidal ideation. This, in turn, places children and adolescents at considerable risk of morbidity and, of some cases, mortality. Beyond the educational impact and social impact of school closures, there's been a substantial impact on food security and physical activity for children and for families. So that's very important. And there's a highway, it goes both ways. The National Education Association recently stated, despite the momentous efforts of educators during the pandemic, online learning has never been an effective replacement for in-person learning and support. Being at the school, being on the campus is very, very important. One study estimates that due to school closures last spring, the average student will begin this school year roughly 35% behind in reading compared to the typical year and more than 50% behind in math. That's a big statement. According to McKinsey & Company, learning loss will probably be greatest among low-income Black and Hispanic students. They're the ones that are hit the hardest. We don't want that happening. 30 million American students rely on schools for free and reduced meals. Over 70% of the students who receive mental health services do so through their schools. According to HHS, 1 in 5 reports allegedly having to do with child abuse. They have neglect, and these are neglect and neglected cases are submitted by education personnel. So people in the education world on the premises will be the ones that report neglect and other problems when they see the children. They know if they've been neglected, they know if they've been hurt or harmed in any way, whether it's at home or someplace else, but they see this at school. You don't get to see that if you're not going to school. It's a big thing. Fortunately, the data shows that children are lower risk from the China virus very substantially. When children do contact the virus, they often have only very mild symptoms or none at all. And medical complications are exceedingly rare. Those that do face complications often have underlying medical conditions. 99% of all China virus hospitalizations are adults, and 99.96% of all fatalities are adults. That means that children are a tiny percentage, less than 1%, and even a small percentage of 1%. In a typical year, the flu results in more deaths of those under 18 in the United States than have been lost thus far to the coronavirus. Many different names, many different names. The life of every child is sacred and must be protected. Our sole focus is the health and well-being of America's children. I have a very, very special person who loves children, who's I think one of the greatest athletes of all time. A lot of people say the greatest pitcher of all time, known as a relief pitcher, could have been whatever he wanted. Some people, he is the greatest reliever of all time by far, substantially more saves than anybody else. In fact, he got the Presidential Medal of Freedom recently. And I'm reading off these stats. I knew he was the best. I knew he was great, but I didn't know it was almost double anybody else. But he's a man who loves children, has children, loves children. works hard with children. We're going to go outside and be with some little leaguers. Mariano Rivera, you know, he's the Sandman, right? My wife said, darling, why do they call him the Sandman? I said, you know, they play the song. He just puts the batters to sleep. And that's exactly what happened. So having Mariano here is a great honor. Thank you very much. I was talking about children in schools, and there's nobody that's done more than you have. Thank you very much, Mariano. Fantastic man. Given these considerations, we believe many school districts can now reopen safely, provided they implement mitigation measures and health protocols to protect families, protect teachers, and to protect students. And we do have to protect the teachers and the families also. We have to remember that all families should be empowered to make the decision that is right for their own circumstance. This is especially important if a child has underlying health conditions or lives with a parent or grandparent who's at higher risk. In cities or states that are current hotspots, and you'll see that in the map behind me, districts may need to delay reopening for a few weeks, and that's possible. That'll be up to governors. The decision should be made based on the data and the facts on the grounds in each community, but every district should be actively making preparations to open. Again, the children obviously have a very strong immune system, maybe even as strong as yours. They seem to be able to fight it off and not have a problem. So it's pretty amazing, actually. Great, great credit. Our strategy to safely reopen schools mirrors our approach nationwide as we race toward the completion of a vaccine and therapeutics. The responsible path is to shelter those at highest risk while allowing those at lower risk, much lower in the case of young children, to resume work at school, and as long as everyone practices vigilant hygiene and social distancing. We want that. A permanent shutdown was never the strategy, which would ultimately lead to greater mortality and irreversible harms. We don't want to do that. At the same time, we have to get our economy going. It was issued yesterday, housing prices, pricing of housing up 21%. It's the highest in history. It's the highest number in history. Real estate housing went up 21%. Today, the CDC will provide additional guidance for how schools can reopen safely. I hope that local leaders put the full health and well-being of their students first and make the right decision for children, parents, teachers, and not make political decisions. This isn't about politics. It's about something very, very important. This is not about politics.